Have you ever walked past something every single day and never really noticed it? Not because it was hidden, not because it was far away, but because your heart was somewhere else, busy, tired, closed. There was a small garden behind our house. It wasn't beautiful, not at first. In fact, most people would not even call it a garden. It was just a piece of land, a forgotten space, dry soil, a few broken pots, old leaves that no one bothered to clean. And yet, it had always been there, waiting, quietly, patiently, just like something else we had also forgotten. Our family used to be different. We used to laugh more, talk more, sit together without checking the time, without checking our phones, without thinking about what came next. But somewhere along the way, something changed. Not suddenly, not dramatically, just slowly. So slowly that we didn't even notice it happening. Conversations became shorter, meals became quieter, smiles became polite, not real, just enough to keep things moving, just enough to avoid questions. And questions slowly disappeared because asking questions requires caring about the answer, and caring takes energy, something we all felt we didn't have anymore. My father was always working, even when he was home. His mind was somewhere else. My mother stopped telling stories. She used to tell so many about her childhood, about small things that made her smile. But one day, she just stopped, and no one asked why. I stayed in my room more often, not because I wanted to, but because it felt easier. Easier than trying to start a conversation. That might not go anywhere. Easier than feeling that quiet distance, that invisible wall between people who once felt so close. We were still a family, technically. We lived in the same house. We shared the same space. But something important was missing, something we didn't know how to name. Until one afternoon, something small happened. So small that it almost didn't matter. But somehow, it did. The power went out, just like that. No warning, no explanation. The house became quiet, not the usual quiet, but a different kind, a stillness. That felt unfamiliar. There was nothing to do. No screens, no distractions, no easy escape. We found ourselves in the same space, at the same time, with nothing to hold on to, except each other. It felt strange, almost uncomfortable, like meeting people you used to know, but no longer understand. My father walked around the house, looking for something to fix, something to control. But there was nothing. My mother stood near the window, looking outside, as if searching for something, beyond the glass. And I didn't know where to look, so I walked, slowly, without thinking, without a plan, until I reached the back door. I don't know why I opened it. Maybe I just needed air. Maybe I just needed space. Or maybe something inside me was looking for something I didn't understand yet. The garden was there, just like always, quiet, unchanged, forgotten. I stepped outside. The air felt different, cooler, softer, real. For the first time in a long time, I noticed the details, the way the light touched the ground, the way the leaves moved gently with the wind, the way everything continued to exist, even when we ignored it. There was a small plant in the corner, half dry, almost gone, but not completely. A few green leaves, still holding on, still trying. Something about it made me stop, really stop. I crouched down, touched the soil. It was dry, hard, neglected, just like something inside our home. Behind me, I heard the door open, softly. I turned. It was my mother. She didn't say anything. She just stood there, looking at the same plant. For a moment, we shared the same silence. But this silence felt different. It wasn't empty. It was aware. She stepped closer, slowly. Then she said something, very quietly. I used to take care of this. Her voice was soft, almost like a memory. I forgot, she added. Not with guilt, not with sadness, just truth. I looked at her, not quickly, not automatically, but really looked. And for the first time in a long time, I saw something. Not just my mother, but a person, someone who had been there all along, someone we had stopped noticing. We stood there, next to that small plant, not knowing what to do next. But somehow, it felt like the beginning of something. Then my father came outside. He looked at us, then at the garden, confused at first, but then curious. What are you doing? He asked, not in a harsh way, just wondering. No one answered immediately, because there was no clear answer, only a feeling, a quiet pull toward something simple, something we had forgotten. My mother bent down, gently touched the leaves. It just needs water, she said. Simple words, but they stayed in the air. It just needs water, not something big, not something complicated, just something small, something consistent, something caring. My father nodded slowly, then disappeared inside. He came back with a small bucket of water. He didn't say anything. He just placed it beside her. And for the first time in a long time, they did something together. Not a big project, not a serious discussion, just a small action, quiet, simple, real. I watched, then joined, without thinking, without being asked. We watered the plant, carefully, slowly, as if it mattered, as if it was important. And maybe it was, not because of the plant, but because of what it represented. That evening, we didn't go back inside immediately. We stayed in that small garden, talking, not deeply, not perfectly, but more than before, a little more. Enough to feel something shift, something small, but real. The power came back later. The lights turned on. Everything returned to normal. Or at least, it looked like it did. But something had changed. Not in the house, but in us. The next day, someone watered the plant again. Then the next day, and the next. At first, it was just a habit, a small routine. But slowly, it became something else. A reason to step outside, a reason to pause, a reason to be together, without pressure, without expectations. The garden didn't transform overnight. It didn't suddenly become beautiful. But little by little, it changed, and so did we. We started noticing more. Small things, simple things, each other. And maybe, for the first time in a long time, we were learning something again, not through words, not through lessons, but through something quiet, something patient, something alive. We didn't know it yet, but that small garden was about to teach us something. We had forgotten how to care, how to stay, and slowly, how to love again. The next morning, the garden looked the same. Nothing magical had happened overnight. The soil was still uneven. The leaves were still weak. The broken pots were still there. And yet, something felt different, not in the garden, but in the way we looked at it. I woke up earlier than usual, not because I had to, but because something inside me wanted to check, to see if that small moment from yesterday was real, or just something temporary. I walked quietly through the house. The air was still, peaceful, and when I opened the back door, The cool morning breeze touched my face, fresh, gentle, honest. The garden was waiting, just like before. But this time, I didn't walk past it. I stepped into it, slowly, carefully, as if entering a space that mattered. The small plant was still there, its leaves slightly brighter. Or maybe it was just my imagination, but even that felt important. I picked up the watering can. It was still near the door, half full. Someone had placed it there, ready, without saying anything. I poured the water gently, watching the soil absorb it, slowly, quietly, without resistance. And for a moment, I just stood there, listening, not to sound, but to the feeling, that quiet sense that something small was beginning to grow. Behind me, I heard footsteps, soft, familiar. It was my father. He didn't say good morning. He didn't ask what I was doing. He simply stood beside me, looking at the plant. I had the same plant we had ignored for so long. He crossed his arms. Then, after a while, he spoke. It's still alive. Simple words, but they carried something deeper. Not just about the plant, but about something else. Something we were both thinking, but not yet ready to say. I nodded. Yes, I replied, and that was enough. We didn't need more words. Not yet. A few minutes later, my mother joined us. She held something in her hands, a small cloth, old, faded. She walked to one of the broken pots and began to clean it, slowly, carefully, as if it was something valuable, something worth saving. No one told her to do it, no one asked, but she did it anyway. And that felt important. We stayed there together, not talking much, but not distant either. There was a quiet connection, a shared attention, a small beginning. That day, we didn't try to fix everything. We didn't make big plans. We didn't promise anything. We just did what was in front of us, one small thing at a time. My father moved some of the old pots, arranging them in a line, not perfectly, but with intention. My mother cleaned the leaves, removing the dry ones, giving space for new ones to grow. And I cleared the ground, removing stones, pulling out weeds, making room for something new. We worked quietly, side by side, not as strangers, but not fully as a family either, somewhere in between. And maybe that was exactly where we needed to be, not rushing, not forcing, just being there, together. At one point, my father stopped. He looked around, then said something unexpected. We used to have a garden like this. His voice was soft, almost unsure. My mother looked up, surprised. You remember that? She asked. He nodded slowly. Yes, he said, but I forgot. There was no shame in his voice, only honesty. And that honesty opened something. My mother smiled, a small smile, but real. We planted tomatoes, she said. And flowers, he added. They looked at each other, not like before, not distant, but curious, as if rediscovering something they had lost. I listened, quietly, because for the first time, they were sharing something, not information, but memory. And memory has a way of bringing people closer. We continued working, but now something had changed. There were more words, more small exchanges, more moments of connection, not perfect, not smooth, but real. Later that afternoon, we went to a small market, together, not planned, not discussed. It just happened. We walked side by side, slowly, looking at plants, at seeds, at tools we didn't really understand, but wanted to learn. My father picked up a small shovel, testing its weight. My mother looked at flowers, touching the petals gently, as if reconnecting with something familiar. I found seeds, simple ones, easy to grow. At least, that's what the seller said. We didn't buy much, just a few things, but it felt like more because it wasn't about what we bought, it was about what we were building. When we returned home, the garden felt different again, not because it had changed, but because we had. We planted the seeds carefully, following simple instructions, making small mistakes, laughing quietly when things didn't go right. And that laughter felt new, not loud, not forced, but natural, like something returning. As the sun began to set, we sat down in the garden on old chairs, not comfortable, not perfect, but enough. We watched the sky change from light to soft orange to deep blue. And in that quiet moment, no one reached for a phone. No one tried to leave. We stayed, just stayed. And that was something we hadn't done in a very long time. My mother spoke softly. "It's peaceful here." We both nodded, because it was true, but not just because of the garden, because of us, because for the first time in a long time, we were present, not somewhere else, not distracted, not disconnected, but here, together. That night, we ate dinner a little differently. Nothing special. The same food, the same table. But something had shifted. We talked a little more, listened a little longer, stayed a little later. And even when the conversation slowed, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt comfortable, like something we didn't need to escape from. Before going to bed, I looked out the window, toward the garden. It was dark now, quiet, still, but I knew something. Something small, something certain. That garden was no longer forgotten. And maybe neither were we. Because sometimes healing doesn't begin with big conversations or dramatic moments. Sometimes it begins with something simple, something quiet, like watering a plant, like standing beside someone without needing to say anything, like choosing to stay, and slowly, day by day, something begins to grow, not just in the soil, but in the space between people, a space that once felt empty, but is now starting to feel alive. A few days passed, then a week, then another. The garden did not become beautiful overnight. It did not suddenly turn into something perfect. There were still empty spaces, still uneven soil, still plants that didn't grow the way we expected. And yet, every morning, something pulled us outside, not out of duty, not because we had to, but because we wanted to. And that feeling was new. At first, we didn't notice it clearly. It was just a small change, a quiet shift. But over time, it became something we could feel, something real. My father started waking up earlier. He would step into the garden before going to work, not for long, just a few minutes. But those minutes mattered. He would stand there, looking at the plants, sometimes touching the leaves, sometimes just breathing. And before leaving, he would water them, carefully, like it was something important. My mother began spending more time outside, not all day, but enough. She would sit near the corner, where the first small plant still grew, the one that started everything. She often brought a small cloth, cleaning the leaves, adjusting the soil, fixing small things no one else noticed. And sometimes she would just sit, looking, thinking, or maybe not thinking at all. I joined them, not every moment, but often, more than before. And slowly, the garden became something else, Not just a place, but a habit, a quiet meeting point, a space where we could exist together without pressure, without expectations, without needing to be perfect. One afternoon, something unexpected happened. It started with something small, a plant that didn't grow. We had planted several seeds. Most of them had started to sprout, small green shoots, pushing gently through the soil. But one area remained empty. No matter how many days passed, nothing appeared. My father noticed it first. He stood there, looking down, frowning slightly. "It should have grown by now," he said. My mother came closer, kneeling beside the spot. She touched the soil, then shook her head gently. "Maybe the seeds didn't survive," she said. Her voice was calm, accepting. But my father didn't move. He kept looking, as if waiting, as if expecting something to change. "It's strange," he said. "I did everything the same. Same water, same soil, same sunlight. Why this one?" No one answered. Because sometimes there is no clear answer. And sometimes we don't really need one. But that moment stayed with us. Later that evening, we sat in the garden again. The sun was lower, the air softer. And the empty spot was still there, quiet, unchanged. My father spoke again, this time more slowly. "Not everything grows the same way," he said. My mother looked at him, then nodded. "Yes," she said, "some things need more time." I listened, and something inside me shifted. Because it wasn't just about the plant, it was about something deeper, something we had all experienced, but never really understood. Some relationships don't heal quickly. Some wounds don't disappear easily. Some words take time to be spoken, and some silences take time to be broken. That night, we didn't try to fix the empty spot. We didn't dig it up. We didn't replace the seeds. We left it, just as it was. And somehow, that felt right. The next morning, something else happened. It wasn't dramatic, not something you would notice immediately. But it was there, small, quiet, important. A tiny green line, barely visible, had appeared in the soil, right in the empty spot. At first, I thought I imagined it. But when I looked closer, it was real. A small shoot, fragile, delicate, but alive. I called my parents, not loudly, just enough. They came, and we all looked at it, together. No one spoke at first, because this moment didn't need words. It needed attention, presence, understanding. My father smiled, not widely, but deeply. "It just needed more time," he said. My mother nodded. "Yes," she replied. And we almost gave up on it. That sentence stayed in the air, soft but meaningful, because it was not just about the plant. It was about us. There had been moments when we almost gave up on conversations, on connection, on each other, not because we didn't care, but because we didn't see progress. We didn't see change. We didn't see growth. And sometimes, when we don't see results, we stop trying. But that small plant, that tiny green shoot, reminded us of something simple, but powerful. Growth does not always happen when we expect it. Healing does not follow our timeline. And love does not always show itself immediately. Sometimes it is quiet, hidden, slow, but still there, still growing, still waiting. From that day, we treated the garden differently, not as something we controlled, but as something we supported. We stopped expecting everything to grow perfectly. We stopped comparing. We stopped rushing. Instead, we paid attention, we adjusted, we waited, and most importantly, We stayed together. In that process, something inside our family continued to change. Conversations became easier, not always deep, but more open. We started sharing small things, thoughts, feelings, memories, and things that once felt unnecessary now felt important. One evening, my father said something unexpected. I used to think, he paused, then continued, that providing was enough. His voice was calm, honest. But I see now. He looked at the garden. Being here matters more. My mother didn't reply immediately. She just looked at him, then said softly, "It always did." There was no blame, no anger, just truth. And that truth felt like healing. I sat there, listening, not as a child, but as someone learning something I had never been taught, that love is not just about big actions, not just about responsibility, but about presence, attention, consistency. And the garden continued to grow, not perfectly, but honestly. And so did we. We were still learning, still adjusting, still finding our way. But now we were doing it together. And that made all the difference. Because sometimes love doesn't return all at once. It comes back slowly, like a small green shoot, breaking through the soil, quiet, fragile, but full of life. And if we are patient, if we are present, if we choose to stay, it will grow, stronger, deeper, more real than before. Time continued to move forward, quietly, almost unnoticed. The garden changed little by little, not in big dramatic ways, but in small, steady, almost invisible steps. Leaves became fuller, colors became deeper, the soil felt softer beneath our hands, and somehow, without anyone saying it out loud, we began to understand something new. The garden was no longer just a place we visited, it had become a part of how we lived, a part of how we understood each other. There was a rhythm now, a quiet rhythm. Mornings with soft light, evenings with gentle air, and moments in between, where we returned to it again and again, not because we had to, but because something inside us felt better when we did. One afternoon, the sky grew darker than usual. Clouds gathered slowly, heavy, uncertain. The air changed. You could feel it. Something was coming. My mother looked up. It might rain," she said softly. My father nodded, but he didn't move right away. He stood still, looking at the garden as if thinking, as if deciding something. Then, without saying anything more, he walked toward the tools. He picked up a few wooden sticks, some thin rope, and began placing them carefully around the smaller plants. At first, I didn't understand. But then, I saw. He was protecting them, preparing for the rain, not trying to stop it, because he couldn't, but trying to support what might be affected by it. My mother joined him. She brought an old cloth, covering the most fragile leaves, adjusting the edges gently, making sure nothing would be too exposed. I stood there for a moment, watching. Then, without thinking too much, I stepped forward too. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. Each of us seemed to understand what needed to be done, and more importantly, why. The first drops came slowly, soft, almost quiet, touching the soil, resting on the leaves. For a moment, it felt peaceful. But then, the rain grew stronger, heavier, faster. The sound filled the space around us. Water hit the ground. The leaves trembled. The small stems bent under the pressure. And suddenly, the garden looked different. Not calm, not gentle, but struggling, trying to hold on. We stepped back. standing under the edge of the roof, watching. There was nothing more we could do now. The rain was beyond us, beyond control. All we could do was wait and hope. Minutes passed, then more. The rain didn't stop quickly. It stayed, strong, persistent, almost testing everything we had built. I looked at my parents. Their faces were calm, but their eyes were focused, present, as if this moment mattered more than it seemed. And maybe it did, because sometimes it is not the quiet days that shape us, but the difficult ones, the uncertain ones, the moments when we are forced to wait without knowing what will remain after. After a long while, the rain began to slow. The sound softened. The drops became lighter, until finally it stopped. The air felt different again, fresh, cool, still. We stepped back into the garden, carefully, slowly, as if entering a space that had changed because it had. Some plants were leaning, some leaves were torn, some parts of the soil had shifted. It was not the same, not perfect, but not destroyed either. Just changed. My father walked to the center, looking around, taking everything in. My mother followed, her hands already moving, lifting a leaf, fixing a small branch, adjusting what she could. I joined them, and once again, we began, not rebuilding, not starting over, but continuing, helping what remained stay strong. As we worked, something became clear. The plants we had supported earlier, the ones we had protected, were still standing, not untouched, but stable. And the ones we had not noticed as much had suffered more. That realization sat quietly inside me because it felt familiar. In life, in family, the places we give attention to, the parts we care for, often become stronger, and the ones we ignore, even unintentionally, become fragile, not because they are weak, but because they were left alone. That evening, we didn't rush. We stayed in the garden longer than usual, fixing, adjusting, caring, not trying to make it perfect again, but trying to understand it better. At one point, my father sat down, right there on the ground, looking at everything around him. Then he spoke, quietly. As much as we try, he paused, we can't control everything. My mother nodded, sitting beside him. But we can choose what we care for, she said, and how we show up. I listened, and those words felt important because they were not just about the garden. They were about us, about life, about the way we had lived before, trying to control, trying to avoid difficulty, trying to keep everything stable, but not always paying attention to what truly needed care. That night, the garden rested, and so did we. But something had changed again, not in a dramatic way, but in a deeper one. We understood more now, not just how to grow something, but how to stay with something, even when it was difficult, even when it was uncertain, even when it didn't go as planned. The next morning, the sunlight returned, soft, warm, touching everything gently. And as we stepped outside, we saw it. The garden, still alive, still growing, still trying. And in that moment, it felt like a quiet reminder that love, like this garden, will face storms, will be tested, will change. But if we stay, if we care, if we support each other through the difficult moments, it does not disappear. It adapts, it strengthens, it becomes something deeper, something more real. And as we stood there together, in the soft morning light, we didn't say much, because we didn't need to. We already knew. We were no longer just fixing a garden. We were learning how to take care of each other in ways we had never truly understood before. Days turned into weeks, and weeks quietly became months. The garden was no longer small, not in the way it used to be. It had grown, not perfectly, not evenly, but honestly. There were flowers now, soft colors, opening slowly in the morning light. There were vegetables too, simple ones, nothing special, but enough to remind us that something we cared for was giving something back. And in the middle of it all, that first small plant still stood, stronger now, taller, its leaves full and steady, no longer fragile, no longer uncertain, just alive. We spent more time in the garden than anywhere else, not because we planned it that way, but because it became natural. It became part of us. Morning conversations started there, evening reflections ended there. And sometimes we didn't speak at all. We simply sat together in a space that once felt forgotten, but now felt like home. One evening, as the sky slowly turned golden, my father brought out 3 cups of tea. He placed them carefully on the small table, the same table that used to feel unnecessary. Now, it felt important. We sat down. The air was calm, the garden quiet, and for a moment, everything felt complete. Not perfect, but enough. My father looked around, taking in every detail, every leaf, every flower, every small sign of growth. Then he said something that stayed with me. I almost sold this house once. The words were simple, but they landed deeply. My mother looked at him, surprised. You never told me that, she said. He nodded slowly. I didn't think it mattered, he replied. There was a pause, not uncomfortable, but thoughtful. Then he continued. I thought a new place might fix things. He looked down at his hands. At the time, I believed the problem was outside. He lifted his eyes, looking at the garden. But it wasn't. My mother didn't interrupt. She just listened, carefully, fully, something we had all learned to do, over time. I see it now, he said quietly. It wasn't the house. It was us. The words were not heavy. They were not filled with regret. They were simply true. And truth, spoken gently, has a way of healing. My mother reached for her cup, holding it between her hands. I think we all felt that, she said softly. Something missing, but we didn't know how to say it. I listened, and for the first time, I realized something important. We were not a broken family. We were a quiet one, a family that didn't know how to express, a family that stayed silent, not because we didn't care, but because we didn't understand how. And this garden, this small space behind the house, had taught us something we had never learned before: how to be present, how to notice, how to care in small, consistent ways. The conversation continued, slowly, naturally, without pressure. My father spoke more that night than he had in years, not all at once, not dramatically, but in small pieces, honest pieces. He talked about work, about stress, about the way he had carried everything alone, believing that silence was strength, believing that providing was enough. My mother listened, not with judgment, but with understanding. She shared her side too, the quiet loneliness, the feeling of being unseen, not ignored, but not fully understood either. And I sat between them, not as someone outside the conversation, but as part of it, because their silence had shaped me too. Their distance had become my normal, but now something was different. We were no longer avoiding those truths. We were facing them gently, together. The garden around us stayed quiet, but somehow it felt like it was listening. like it understood, like it had been waiting for this moment. And maybe, in its own way, it had helped create it. As the sky darkened, small lights from inside the house began to glow, but none of us stood up right away. We stayed a little longer because leaving that moment felt unnecessary. When we finally went inside, nothing felt rushed, nothing felt forced, everything felt aligned. That night, I looked out at the garden again, just like I had done before, but this time, the feeling was different. It was no longer about hope, it was about understanding. The garden had never been about plants, not really. It had been about attention, about presence, about choosing to care every day, in small ways. And in doing that, we had changed something, not just outside, but inside. Inside each of us, and inside the space we shared. The next morning, everything continued, not as something new, but as something natural. We still watered the plants, we still adjusted the soil, we still sat together. But now, we also spoke more, listened more, not perfectly, but honestly. And that honesty became our new foundation. Because in the end, love does not need to be loud. It does not need to be dramatic. It does not need to be perfect. It simply needs to be present, consistent, real. Just like that small garden behind our house, the one we almost forgot, the one we almost lost, but chose to care for. And in doing so, it gave something back. Not just food, not just beauty, but something far more valuable. It gave us a way back to each other, a quiet path, and a gentle reminder that even when things feel distant, even when silence has lasted too long, it is never too late to begin again. So if there is a space in your life that feels forgotten, if there is a relationship that feels quiet or distant or uncertain, maybe you don't need to fix everything at once. Maybe you just need to start small, to show up, to notice, to care, one moment at a time. Because sometimes the smallest things create the deepest changes, and sometimes all it takes is a small garden and the decision to stay. Thank you for listening. If this story made you feel something, take a moment to think about someone in your life, someone you can reach out to, someone you can sit with, even in silence. And if you would like more slow, meaningful English stories, don't forget to follow the channel. Take your time, listen slowly, and let each story grow with you.